40 years in this country, our kids have been learning their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. And as they've been learning them, they've been pushed farther and farther to political points. That the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s are being taught, but as they're learning, they're also getting a decidedly political and ideological push. That seems obvious to anybody who's paying attention. What the difference between Common Core and what's gone before it is, I honestly believe that now the ideology is more important than the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. The primary purpose of Common Core is this stuff. Secondarily is the pedagogy. As Milgram points out, what possible reason can you have for creating a math curriculum that is so arbitrary that moms and dads can't help their kids? Other than to make it so, moms and dads can't help their kids. Got a doctor, a medical doctor in Green Bay. She's one of the only math candidates to take the MCAT in the last 40 years who got 100% on her math MCAT. And she can't help her 5th grader with math. Because you see what's going on here. And you can't do it the traditional way because there's no way to link it to this stuff. And as Milgram points out, there can be no reason for this other than to guarantee that moms and dads can't help their kids with their math homework. And that's a design, that's a perk of the design, not a flaw, right? So my 2 cents worth at the end of our talk, I'm giving it to you. You can blame me for this statement. Everything else you can go track down yourself. I think we've reached the point where the ideology and the control now is the primary purpose of Common Core, and the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s, secondary and relatively trivial. Doesn't really matter in the final analysis. And the last thing that I'm going to show you, and the one more other expert who's not me. Not surprisingly, in the couple of years that this has been working its way through the schools, all of this has been working its way through the schools, we have a document with 250 clinical and developmental child psychologists of all different stripes, all different politics, who've all signed a national petition urging the states to pull out of Common Core because it is developmentally inappropriate and it is abusive. If you, at age 5 and 6 and 7, you are not teaching kids this way, you're encoding things in them. And I'm going to show you just one of those, just one testimony. This is Dr. Maria Calamia from New York, the state that's had it a couple of years longer than you. This is Dr. Maria testifying before the New York State hearings, the state hearings on Common Core. You watch this and you'll understand why the state of New York, hardly a right-wing state, you'll understand now why New York is having real second thoughts about this. Here's Dr. Maria addressing the State Senate Select Committee.
Good afternoon. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a psychotherapist. I work with parents, children, and about half of my caseload is teachers also. My caseload represents about 20 different school districts in Suffolk County. In the fall of 2012, my phone started ringing. I started getting an inordinate number of referrals of students, a lot of honor students, 8th graders mostly, who were self-mutilating. They were cutting themselves with sharp objects, and they were burning themselves with cigarettes. My phone never stopped. And I didn't know why. I asked the kids, and all they kept saying was, "We can't take the pressure, it's too much." I also started getting a lot of elementary school students referred to me. They were refusing to go to school. They said they felt stupid and that school was too hard. They were throwing tantrums, begging to stay home, and upset to the point of vomiting. I was hearing from parents about kids bringing home homework they couldn't help them with. I was alarmed to hear that in some cases there were no textbooks for the parents to look at, and they had no idea what their children were learning. The teachers were reporting a staggering level of anxiety and depression, and that was when I first heard the term Common Core, and learned about the standards that we now say set the bar so high anyone can walk right under it. Everyone was talking about the tests, the tests. As the school year progressed and the tests loomed, my patients were increasing their self-mutilating behaviors. They were complaining of insomnia, panic attacks, loss of appetite, depressed mood, and in one case, suicidal thoughts that resulted in a 2-week hospital stay for an adolescent. We can't regulate biology. Young children cannot engage in the type of critical thinking that the Common Core calls for. That would require a fully developed prefrontal cortex, a part of the brain that is not fully functional until adulthood. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for critical thinking, rational decision-making, and abstract thought, all things that the Common Core requires prematurely. We give children pre-assessments, tell them to succeed, and then give them tests on material they haven't learned and tell them it's okay to fail. They cannot resolve that mixed message. Last spring, a 6-year-old encountered a multiplication sign on the NWEA first grade math teacher went and asked the teacher what it was. The teacher was not allowed to help him and told him to just do his best. From that point on, the student's test performance went downhill. He couldn't shake off the unfamiliar symbol and couldn't believe his teacher wouldn't help him. The Common Core requires children to read informational texts that are owned by a handful of corporations. They don't have a filter to distinguish good information from bad. So whatever you put in front of them, they take that as gospel. They're literal. So when we give them a textbook that explains the Second Amendment as the people have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia, they will look no further for clarification. We ask them to write critically using emotionally charged language to persuade instead of inform. They don't have that functional prefrontal cortex, so they tap into their limbic system, which is the part of the brain that involves basic human emotions, anger and fear being the foremost. So when we ask them to use emotionally charged language, we're actually asking them to fuel their language with fear and anger and aggression. They cannot temper this judgment. They don't have the ability to do that. So we teach to the test, which I think doesn't really measure learning. I think the tests measure endurance and resilience. Only a child who can sit still for 90 minutes, come back the next day and do it again, and the next day again, can succeed. I'm going to introduce you to a couple, I'm almost done. I'm going to introduce you to just a couple of student stories, okay? A couple of the faces of the Common Core. We have an entire third grade class that spent the entire day sobbing after one testing session. A second grader who witnessed this is now in third grade and won't go to school. She's being evaluated, a 7-year-old being evaluated for psychotropic medication just to get her to go to school. A 6-year-old who came home crying because in September, in the first grade, she didn't know what a vertex was. 2 8-year-olds opted out of the ELA exam and were publicly denied cookies because the teacher gave them to the class but wouldn't give them to them. And that teacher, who under duress, felt obligated to do such a thing. A 6th grader who once aspired to be a writer but now won't do it because we do it all day long, even in math. And a mother who has to leave work early because her son is hysterical over his math homework, and his CPA grandfather who's babysitting for him can't even help him do it. And countless other kids who are refusing to go to school, feel stupid, and now are completely turned off to education. I will conclude with this one thought. Our country became a superpower on the backs of men and women who learned in one-room schoolhouses. This isn't rocket science. It doesn't take a great deal of technology or corporate or government involvement to help our children to succeed. We need to rethink the Common Core and the associated high-stakes testing and get back to the business of educating our children in a safe, healthy, and productive manner. Thank you.
All right, that's the website. Now, also keep in mind, I've been on the road like nonstop for the last month. So not everything in this presentation is quite there yet. If there's anything I talked about today that you can't find, email me directly. I've got business cards. I'll send it to you myself. All right? That's the first thing. And if you go to this website, no one's going to put you on a list. No one's going to ask you for money. All right? I'm going to make one final comment, and then maybe our moderator wants to, and then I'll take any, or maybe she's going to pass the microphone around for questions. The final thing I want to say about this is 95% of what I showed you is not from me. It's from teachers' unions. It's from teachers. It's from psychologists. It's from Department of Education lawyers. It comes from all sorts of people, the vast majority of whom have no right-wing agenda. You can dismiss it all you want. Whenever I give talks like this in states or even in Wisconsin, because most of this stuff hasn't happened in your schools, there's this kind of snickering, this isn't in our schools. I don't know what you're talking about, this will never be in our schools. All I can tell you is that's what they said in New York, and now the New York teachers unions went out of it. That's what they said in Chicago too. That's all I'm telling you, right? It's happening. It's happening in other schools. These assignments, these books, These problems, they're all over the country. If you go to this website, we didn't bring Dr. Mary to Wisconsin to testify. We brought Gary Thompson. Gary Thompson is an African-American father of 2 and a clinical psychologist. He's got 1 special needs daughter and 1 gifted daughter, and both of them, in his colorful words to the Wisconsin committee, are getting royally screwed over by this. You can watch Gary Thompson's entire testimony on this from a clinical psychiatric perspective. The people, this transcends politics, it transcends ethnicity, it transcends education level. And even if you still maintain after all of this that none of this will ever happen here, and even if it does, we can control it. And we're not going to, if that's your argument, that's fine. But I ask you, why? Why? Why so quick? If this is going to be good, it's going to be good in 2 years or 4 years. Why this rush to jump into park? Why the same rush to jettison the standards that were the best of any states in the union? Well, I can give you 220 million reasons why you might want to do that. Well, the people at the top might want to do it. But this is an honest question. You had the only real world-class standards of any state in the union. And that's going away now in favor of Common Core. So even if you want to keep Common Core, keep it for 2 years or 3 years. You don't want to keep it. I know you. I'm trying to play Mr. Even Keel here, right? Don't ruin it for me. And I mean what I'm saying. You don't want to keep it. But even if you think, I'm appealing to those who aren't convinced. Even if you think you want to keep it, then why not just stay out of the test? What's it going to cost you as a state? Stay out of the test for a couple of years. And watch as more and more states, Missouri next week, right? Watch what's going to happen as the 4 states who didn't take them are already now 8 states. And what's going to happen a year from now when it's 15 states? Are you so sure that these are so good, even though they've never been tested anywhere before, even though it's all experimental? You're so sure it's worth committing 100% to this now. That is an unreasonable position. And my humble opinion is, not being an outsider, my humble opinion is the people of Massachusetts deserve better and they have better. So I'll take any questions you have, although I'll say this. I can't help you. If you say to me, it's not in our schools, I'll say, I believe you. If you say to me, it is in my schools, I'll believe you. I don't know. I'm not talking about what Massachusetts is doing, and I'm not talking about what your school system's doing. I'm talking about what we know. I'm talking about what the experts say. I'm talking what we see in states all across the country. Do I know there are horror stories in Massachusetts? Yeah, I've heard 24 of them in the 2 days I've been here. But I am making no judgment on you, your school board, your teachers. I'm trying to help, I think, to the best that I can. I'm trying to help your teachers, and I'm certainly trying to help you all. So take it for what it's worth, verify everything I said, make it yours and not about me, and thank you for listening.
If you're fed up and you believe it's in your schools and you want to do something, make sure you sign up on our clipboard, because we are a very active, powerful parent. You don't mess with our kids, that's what I say. And you know what? We can change this. There is a bad decision and we can make change. So don't think you do not have the power as a parent, because you have the power. And we can do it together. Okay, so we are going to go on to a couple of questions. I know it's getting late. I see John has one over here.
I have a question, and this is not to take away from anybody's efforts, okay? Obviously, because there's a lot of good people here that have done a lot of good things. But in a state that the legislature doesn't listen to the populace when we vote for or against something to repeal or turn it back or do whatever, there's nobody in this room, there's not an administrator, there's not a teacher, there's not a principal, there's not a student, there's not a state legislature, there's not a school committee, there's not a mayor, there's not a selectman that ever had anything to do with us adopting this. Our governor went to DC and came back, established a fake committee that met once for like an hour and a half, and said it was the best thing since sliced bread. How in this state, in your opinion, do we stop this?
Well, I can tell you the federal government, that's a great question, and the federal government is a waste of your time. You're not going to change their mind, nor are you going to change the governor's mind. I think in an election year like this one, you want to spend as much time, realistically, Common Core is not going away in Massachusetts, not this summer. Was your legislature even in session? It's not going away for a while. The best you can hope for is a year or a year and a half or 2 years from now to get rid of it. What you have to do is the following. If this is a big, important issue to you, let your potential candidates know it, right? Make your candidates tell you where they sit. If it's somebody you voted for last time, right, and you like the guy or like the lady, you tell, hey, I voted for you, I support you, but this is conditional now. Where do you stand on this issue? Make them tell you. That doesn't mean they'll do it after they get elected, we know, but make them tell you. That's the first thing. And here's the other piece of advice I have for you. When Massachusetts gets its first state tests, when the first national tests begin to kick in, possibly in spring of next year, same thing's going to happen to you that happened in New York and Florida, Kentucky. Same thing. Moms and dads who are paying no attention, which is to say the vast majority of moms and dads, are going to be hit with all sorts of shock. They're going to be angry. You have two options. You can let this go dormant until then, and then when the explosion happens, you won't be ready for it and nothing will come. Or you keep a low fire burning on this. Don't let them make you forget this because it's summer. All right? You have all sorts of opportunities. You got Sandy again, 45 minutes away. Bring her back. Professor Milgram will come here. Buy him a plane ticket. He will sit down with you and explain to you in his one of 22 math. So impressive was his math performance that lowly me didn't quite understand it. I had a math professor sitting next to me, so I'm telling you, I kept elbowing him. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. So he'll tell you. Right? So I would say to you that the best bet you have is to politely and respectfully, always, politely and respectfully keep the pressure on. If you find this junk in your schools, make note. Don't just take it to your administrators. Make copies of it all and get together with people. Make a database in Massachusetts to show moms and dads. When you get told by people this will never happen in our schools, I've seen a dozen things that people handed me in the last 2 days from Massachusetts schools that are as shocking as things you've seen here. Do I think that's in Shrewsbury schools? I have no idea. But I'm telling you what I saw. Do it. Because what happens is if you keep the low fire burning, right, keep the awareness up, keep your candidates honest, make sure they know where you stand. When those tests hit and Armageddon breaks out, that's how a small burning fire becomes a gas fire. My last piece of advice to you on that question is this. I don't know when it will happen. We're already at the point where 4 states, beside the 4 who didn't take it, have pulled out. Inevitably, by this time next year, there will be more. I don't know how many more, but there are 28 states seriously trying this. And I don't include Wisconsin as one of them, and I don't include Massachusetts as one of those 28 states. But what's going to happen is, I don't know if it's going to be 6 states, or 8 states, or 12 states, because we're going to get to that number eventually. At some point, the federal government will no longer be able to penalize those states who pull out. It's one thing to threaten tiny Indiana with a complete loss of their federal funds, but you can't do that to 13 states. You just can't. The federal government cannot withhold the entire education budget of 13 states. So at some point, probably before Massachusetts gets to them, probably before Wisconsin gets to them, I do think we will start to achieve a critical mass. At that point, the whole thing may just collapse of its own stupidity. But I wouldn't count on that, number one. And the other thing you should do then, with that in mind, is keep working in Massachusetts, but if there are states around you who are beginning to move, right, and you can send $20 or $25 to the people in North Carolina who are on the verge of this, or try to support efforts in states like New Hampshire, right, who maybe will have a better chance of getting out before you, then do it, because the more states we help to get out, the louder our voices become. So, what do all those states, what does a state like New York, that's a blue state, what do they know that we don't? Why, when they want out after 2 years, should we just ignore that? And the more of these states that are doing, I could see how the privileged corridors of Boston Common might look down on Oklahoma's decision to pull out, but they can't quite look the same way at New York doing it, right? So remember, it's a national fight, not just a Massachusetts fight. Good question.
Well, thank you. And that, you know, one thing too is when you say elected officials, remember your school committee members. If they are not aligned and if they are not doing their homework when it comes to Common Core and Park, then we need to vote them out. And that is very, very important. And the other thing too is we are doing very active things here. We are doing petitions to vote for the MCAS opposed to the park. So we can present our school committee members that the citizens do not want park. So we do have some active things happening in the community. Okay, Mark?
Dr. Pesta, my name is Mark Fisher. I am a Republican candidate for governor. But I'm also a parent in Shrewsbury. 9 years ago, Shrewsbury was the only city or town in the country to be asking school-age children as young as 10 whether they were having oral sex, how often they were having it, whether they were having it with a man, with a woman, or with both. 9 years ago. We've changed it a little bit. Now we're asking 12-year-olds that question. A lot of people in this room don't know that, but it's public information. If you go to the school website and you drill down to surveys, you will find it. All the questions are there for you to see. My question is, are there any silver bullets that we can use to kill these things, or is it just the hard work that Donna and Common Core Forum are doing to prevent it?
There are no silver bullets. Remember where we started this conversation. Hang on a second, Donna. I want to ask the candidate a question too, so hang on 1 second. But before I do that, there are no silver bullets. Remember where we started the talk tonight with 95% of you really, really in the dark about this? Even if you don't believe me, or even if you don't like what I said and don't think it's true, the fact remains is you have not heard much of anything from the other side on this. And there's a reason for that. I honestly believe you don't hear much because there's not much to say in defense of this. There's just really not. That's why they will never, and that's why they will never talk to you about how it was implemented. They will never talk to you about how your state took it. They will never talk to you about any of this stuff. They'll force you to talk only about the standards in a complete vacuum. So there is no silver bullet. But I do think there are silver linings in this. I think there are things, look, moms and dads are more upset about education than at any time in the last 50 years. And is it a lot of moms and dads? No, but the sheer, what do you think won in Oklahoma? Why do you think it got pulled out of Indiana? It had nothing to do with politicians, ultimately. And it had nothing to do with superintendents of schools or state education boards. It was a critical mass of moms and dads just saying, we're not going to take this. And when you get that kind of turnout, politicians they may not like it, but they're forced to listen. So the silver, and I got to tell you, I said this before, we are in this mess, all of us, me too, moms and dads, we're in this mess because for far too long, we don't go to school board meetings, we don't pay attention to curriculum changes, we drop our kids off at school, and we concede that 8 hours a day, and many of our teachers are hardworking and they're trying to do the right thing. This is not about that. We have decided that it's somebody else's responsibility, not ours. And so I understand why our administrators and our school boards and our teachers are scratching their heads over our discontent, because they've been doing stuff like this for 30 years. Right? That happened in these schools well before anybody ever heard of Common Core. So this has been going on, and there's been nary an uproar over it. So good. The silver lining is that now there is. And we've got to turn that uproar, even in Massachusetts, into a sizable enough amount to moms and dads that this gets changed. Now I want to ask you, if I may, all right, I just said, pick a candidate and make your support conditional. Will you right now, before all these good people, make a definitive statement about what you would do about Common Core if you get elected?
It's simply follow the advice of Nancy Reagan. I mean, just say no. I mean, I've said this before to people. It's not just the first time I'm saying it here. I mean, Common Core. I've heard you speak before. We've heard it all before. Common Core, rotten to the core. I mean, it's a no-brainer for many of us. And yeah, we just say no. We reject the funds that have been offered to us. These programs that administrators and school officials don't know about, I think they've been enticed into it by dangling the money out there. And like you said, you follow the money. So we reject the money. We're not going to be bribed into it. We just say no. It's simple.
And thank you for going on record, everybody. Thank you very much.
Mike, take the mic.
Dr. Pesta, my question was already answered, but I just wanted to thank you for coming out here tonight. I've heard you talk myself, sitting at my kitchen table, listening for hours. My wife says, what the heck are you doing? I think your stuff is great.
Do you have a man crush?
I don't.
Oh.
David, I have one on David McGinney, but I think he already left here tonight. So I wanted to thank you because it was very informative and was obviously better to hear it in person. I also wanted to thank Common Core Forum for bringing you.
Yeah, how about a round of applause for our organizers? How about that? Yeah. Thank you very much.
I can't name them all, but I see a number of them in the group here, and they're doing wonderful things around the state. I run Mass Parents Opt-Out of Park pilot testing, and we have about 800 members now. We were trying to help folks opt their kids out of the park assessment, the pilot test that came through, and we still have a couple of more I think we have the math coming up. But our DESC really pushed back against us, basically told us we're breaking the law if we opt our kids out. School districts were pushing back. Parents, were really upset. They'd go to their principal and say, hey, listen, I don't want my kid to take this, and they'd say, well, your kid has to. It's a federal mandate, your kid has to sit for this thing. And we've heard similar stories like you said about, not cookies, but, kids having to sit in the principal's room, stand on a wall if they decide to opt out. So it's a real tough situation here. I just wanted to say, I agree with you, there's no silver bullets, but I did want to mention to the folks, and I'm glad everybody came out here to hear you tonight, that what I've seen over the past year in Massachusetts, and folks like the people at Common Core Forum are helping this, is the individual groups having little programs like this, I think, is going to win this fight. Because I don't think that our legislature in Massachusetts in particular is going to push back on this thing. I think they all drank the Kool-Aid, they're all going to play ball right to the end. However, I do think small gatherings like this, in every town and city in Massachusetts, informing people who otherwise don't know anything about this, is eventually going to turn the tide. And a great way to do it, folks, and you saw it happen, it's not turning out well, but you saw it happen across the Middle East. Social media is huge for those of you that use it. And I have encouraged people to start their own Facebook pages. So if you go home and in your town there's not a Facebook page that discusses Common Core and park testing, start one. I've seen them start with 2 people, and then they have 20, then they have 50, then they have 500, mine has 800. And what you can do is link things from Common Core Forum over and get people to meetings like this. So eventually in Massachusetts, the only way we're going to beat this thing, moms and dads, wake up more moms and dads, school committees, teachers. So I'd encourage you to go back out there and listen to this gentleman on the internet. He's some really great stuff.
Mike, just so I know, what is your last name?
Watson.
Well, nice to meet you, Mike. Quick comment about what you said. Thank you for that. I think you're exactly right. This can be won. And as far, think about the contradictory message. Moms and dads are being told it's a federal mandate, your kids have to take this test. And then when they opt out, what happens to them? Some bully of an administrator who's being pressured from above makes that kid sit in a room and watch a blank wall. Well, obviously there is no federal punishment for opting out. If the worst you can do to the kids who opt out is use your petty position to make them sit in front of a blank wall because mom and dad tried to do what's best for them. Every state that this has happened in, we tell them the same thing. You just send 3, if you want to opt your kid out, you send 3 emails. 1, I'm opting my kid out of the testing. The first email you will inevitably get back from the school is, you're damn right you're taking it, your kid's going to be here. Then don't even argue, send the same email. I'm opting my kid out of the test. The second response you're going to get is, come in and let's talk. Come in and let's talk about this. Send the exact same message again. The third response you will get is, I vehemently disagree with you, but I can't stop you. Right? Don't let them pretend like there's a federal mandate for this. New York, they did last semester, they did an opt-out of Common Core testing day. 30,000 New York moms and dads kept their kids home from school. That's a lot of moms and dads, right? You can do that here, right? Can you imagine in a little town like Shrewsbury, I don't even know how big this town is, what if 50% of the moms opted their kids out of the testing day, one of the testing days? That's a huge, huge number, right? Yeah. This lady over here. Oh. Thank you.
So I'm from Medway, Mass, and Mike Watson, I just have to thank you because I met Mike at a park informational meeting at Framingham State in March, and you completely inspired me to get more informed because I did get that email that my 3rd grader, our youngest daughter, was selected for the park pilot in late February, and I did send that first email. Can I opt out? No, you cannot. Then I got more informed, and I wrote the entire class. In fact, here's another dad from my daughter's class, and 12 3rd graders opted out of the park pilot. I mean, that is just one little piece of the puzzle. I will say, in defense of my district, they were very respectful of all the parents who opted out, and it wasn't just in 3rd grade. There were other grades because we were on a bit of a mission trying to get other parents more informed.
Help me put that together though. They told you no, you have to take it, and then it ended with
my first email was, I know the principal well, but can we opt out of the test? You cannot opt out. I wanted to opt into MCAS, but our district had said we're not going to over-test We will, if you're part of the park pilot, you don't have to be part of the MCAS. Well, I wanted to be part of the MCAS. This was my daughter's baseline year for 3rd grade. But that was not, that was out of my hands. So then what's really important for parents and grandparents to know, to pass on, is it's the semantics of opt-out. You just need to say, I am declining participation for my child. Bottom line. And we got a very nice response back.
Good.
Our administrators and all our teachers, they are in the toughest spot right now.
Absolutely.
And this is why we're getting involved, because we are just trying to help them through this process. And believe me, we're not always welcome at our school committee meetings.
Oh, I know.
They're not psyched when we show up for a meeting. But someone has to be on the other side of the table asking the questions and pushing back. And we do know that people are waking up a little bit at a time.
Well said. I would also follow that up by saying, that's why I really try on these talks. I don't blame my teachers. I don't blame my superintendents. I don't blame my principals. Do some adamantly and vehemently believe this is the right way? Absolutely. And there are a lot that don't. I would love it. If we really want to put our cards on the table, if we ever allowed our teachers anonymously, if we ever were able to do an anonymous teacher survey where teachers knew categorically that they could say what they thought about Common Core without being penalized or hunted down for it, I think you would be blown away. Not all of them, but a much, much, much higher percentage than we even know now. If they could simply say honestly what they think, it would be a whole different ballgame. But the fact that so many of our teachers don't feel they can say honestly. And they've talked to me. They've come up to me at meetings and they said, I really shouldn't be here. When you've got a teacher afraid in his or in her own time to attend a talk that presents a different side of the issue than they've heard in the schools, when those teachers are afraid for their jobs, then something is really, really wrong. I'd be the first one to condemn any meeting like this. Teachers tried to make our teachers feel ashamed of not coming, or insisted, or tried to put teachers on the spot and accuse or condemn them for their views one way or the other. It's just not the way we should be doing things. And you've seen so many ways in Common Core, from the way it was put in, from the fact that most of you didn't know what it was, from the really strange renaming of things, the underhanded tactics, the secrecy, the fact that you allowed non-educators to do this. We've already seen enough to be legitimately suspicious. Legitimately suspicious. All these things happen. If we don't have the rights as mom and dads to demand a better explanation and accounting for this, then the whole system is screwy and needs to be done away with.
I just want to make one point, is that you're 100% right, and I did attend the Massachusetts Teachers Association conference about a month ago, and I was in the presence of 1,200 teachers, and they could freely speak, and through their vote and through their voice, they elected a absolutely non-Common Core president for this year, and she's taking her position in June of 15. Now the interesting thing is, like you say, she's a strange bedfellow. I don't agree with her any bit politically, but we align with Common Core and we can talk about Common Core. And Worcester sent 9 delegates last year, we sent 52 delegates this year because the teachers are fed up and they're gag ordered, they can't speak. So you're right on, and I was behind closed doors, and it's happening. The union now in Massachusetts, you're going to see a switch. You're going to see that they're going to be behind us. We're going to start to see a little bit of a push and pull from the left, and this is great. So I just wanted to say it's happening.
And you know what, and we'll go to this gentleman right away, but that's why one of the reasons why I showed you the Chicago Teachers Union statement, and then New York. Because what's happening in New York and Chicago, that up until the unions decided to make those statements, the teachers couldn't say anything. You know what's happening in New York and Chicago now? Teachers are writing editorials. Teachers are getting together and holding their own meetings to inform students and moms and dads why this isn't working in the schools. Now, because now if the schools try to punish these teachers, the teachers' unions have indicated they will go to bat for the teachers. And now, suddenly, all of a sudden, out of the woodwork come all these teachers. And that's what's going to happen. If what you say is true, and the Massachusetts that's a great sign by electing the person they elected. And if that begins to change, they begin to change. Watch how the dynamics begin to change quickly. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Rick Marchand. I'm running for the 6th District State Representative in Beverly. For me, definitely a no. I've seen this too much already. I know too much. Seriously.
I appreciate the no. This gentleman took a few minutes and say, how might you work to make it happen?
Right. And now what I'd like, when I bring up your website, is there something I can download that's going to be easy? Because this Wednesday, we're going to be talking about this with the school committee. What I want to do is specifically send an email to each individual on the school committee to include the mayor, so they specifically see exactly what's going on. There will be no excuse for them to say, I didn't know any better. They will have the information.
Well, I'm not sure that's the best course of action, because they're going to look at some DVD you give them, and they're going to say, who the hell is that guy? And that's what I said to you at the beginning of this talk, who the hell is this guy? Right? If you honestly think people who are that committed to this are going to sit down and watch all this, I don't think that's the way to do it. I think what I would do if I were you is I would put together your own information base, take our slides, but then hunt them down and document them and hand it to them. Make it come from you, not from me, because who the hell am I? You're running for office. They have more reason to fear you than they do me. But you dodged my question by accident. All right? I want to put what political hot seat. What might you do? I understand that you're against it, but if you do win elected office, do you have any idea what you might do to try to pull it back? What might you do if you get elected that would help us with this fight?
Well, if I'm elected, I'm going to look at what the other states did and what worked for them.
You mean the ones that pulled out?
The ones that pulled out. Rather than try to reinvent the wheel, whatever worked for them, I'm sure will work for us. And of course, in Massachusetts, our standards are a lot higher. So for states that may be a little lower, this may help them. I don't know what the states are. It's not my decision, but I know we're above every other state. I was in the military 22 years. I retired in 2000 after 20. They brought me back in as a recruiter. Now, when I had individuals that took the test, not all of them passed. But if any of these individuals came from the state of Massachusetts, the other recruiters that have been there a long time would say, they're going to pass the ASVAB test, the Armed Service Vocation Aptitude Battery. And they were exactly right.
Because they were from Massachusetts?
Because they were from Massachusetts. The state I was in, it was a little bit harder. So the proof was right there that, with the recruiters that have done it in the past, they knew they were going to pass, no problem.
And as I said earlier, that's your saving grace. A lot of states that want to pull out of Common Core, they don't necessarily, because they were stuck in No Child Left Behind before Common Core. The option they returned to was only marginally better or less offensive. But look at you guys, the silver lining for you is you have the best, and real in the whole darn country. And real quick, you know how you got those standards? Dr. Stotsky was one of them. You know what they did? You know how they created the standards in Massachusetts that were so enviable? Because in Wisconsin, after Sandy and Jim spoke, everybody was stone-faced. They just said, what do you suggest we do? What do we do now? And Sandy said, why don't you do what we did in Massachusetts? And this is a brilliant answer. You got great universities in Wisconsin, just like you got great universities in Massachusetts. Why don't you get your professors, because 90% of Massachusetts that go to college will end up in Massachusetts colleges. Why don't you get your professoriate together and let them tell you, I understand your suspicion. I get it. We're college professors. We're way too political, we're entitled, we're spoiled, and we make too much money. I understand. But no professor, however political, wants to teach remedial math to kids. No English professor, however politicized, wants to teach juvenile literature because kids can't read it. If you bring your college professors together, they will tell you these are the minimum things that we want in a math student. And then what Sandy did is she brought the professors together with the lower level teachers and the administrators, and they made the best standards in the country. Do you know that none of that was ever done with Common Core? Other than Sandy and Jim, who validated, there was no serious effort to reach out to the professors who will be teaching your kids. In other words, these reform groups, the Gates, the Broad Foundation, Achieve Inc., right? These are not people who are in it for the betterment of your kids. They're in it for changing the system to benefit them. Mm-hmm. And that's why your standards are so good, right? Because the professors, whatever you think of them, they're not going to lie about how ready they want your kids to be. Go back to that. And God bless Sandy, because when one totally uncreative Wisconsin legislator said, well, why don't we just adopt Massachusetts standards? She said, no. Because if every state in the union does that, you're back in the same piggy bank, because then some bureaucrat in Washington is going to come down and try to link them all together and make a national standard that will immediately prove that way wasn't working, right? Don't do it. Make your own. And I told you about Minnesota right next to me, right? That they bought hook, line, and sinker the English standards, but they're so proud of their Massachusetts standards that they said they turned down $40 million from the feds. because we don't want your standards, we're sticking with ours. And now you're backing out of yours. So there's a silver lining.
I'm going to have one more question, and you know, oh, okay, Joy, why don't you come up here, and then I have Ben, and got two questions then, and because it's getting kind of late.
Sure. And as we're putting everything away, if you want to come up independently, I'll answer any questions as we're closing up. Okay?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to let the people here know that 3 years ago, Shrewsbury did have monitor bracelets for a class.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Shrewsbury did have monitor bracelets for
Really?
a class in high school. And they were for 10 days, and they were to monitor the caloric intake and their physical activity. So it has been in this school system in this town, so I have to let you know that, about 3 years ago.
And her brave granddaughter spoke about it. She was, how old was she, Joy, at the time? 16, spoke in front of 2,000 people about this, about the bracelets, and just an amazing, she's amazing grandchildren. We have another question here.